I was about 15. And
That's about the age. Welcome everybody to our meeting between management and the commission and our workshop. I would like to ask for a moment of silence, please, for Mayor Lamb and her husband, Ed, who are battling health issues. Thank you for that. Okay, first item on the agenda is a strategic plan. Mayor Lamb asked that simply a copy of that be distributed to the commissioners. And we routinely review that and go through it, and I'll turn that over to discussion with our strategic planner, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. And before you is a paper copy of the Collegedale 2030 land use plan. If you remember, this was adopted in, most of the work was taking place through the latter part of 2014 and generally mostly 2015. It was adopted by the commission early 2016 by resolution. So we've had this in place since that point in time. And when I talk about plans, I usually talk about, you know, it's almost cliche now, but I talk about how, you know, coming from a couple of quotes that have come out of, you know, World War II and Eisenhower's, that he's famously known as saying that plans are worthless, but planning is essential. So what you have in front of you is a written copy and written representation of the collaborative planning efforts that go on daily at the city. And for this one in particular, it was a very concerted effort to get public feedback on that. So the real strategic value, the real value lies with a strategic collaborative process that explores our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's the written representation in front of you. The 2030 plan consists of the introduction, obviously, which describes the city and the city's context in Chapter 2, factors influencing development. But let me direct you to Chapter 4, development goals and policies. Those are broken down into goals and policies for the natural environment, residential sectors, commercial, civic, institutional, industrial, and then general development goals. And so you have that in front of you there, and then followed by the chapter 5, the land use concept, which represents the future development in the city based on the feedback and staff working with stakeholders to form that. And then the final chapter is the Collegedale Transect, which is a concept that we've introduced here to also introduce the concept of form into planning discussions. So that's just a quick synopsis. Notwithstanding the 2030 plan is consulted for every zoning case that staff considers, including the recent zoning request off of Sandy Trail. In fact, it played a key role in justifying staff's recommendation at the time to first defer and then deny the zoning request because it did not match what we had discussed here within the 2030 plan, among some other things. So we have qualitative factors and quantitative factors that we look at from staff, and some of those are quality of life measures, and that's what this plan has particularly undertaken for the city's benefit. Changing conditions, however, that said, changing conditions in the residential and commercial real estate markets that are taking place due to the shift to online and the COVID shift that we've seen lately, which has really disrupted some of the commercial real estate market. So in keeping with best practices that dictate a plan review and update every 5 years, this is coinciding with that point in time. So therefore, staff is already working on several initiatives outlined in the current plan while also preparing a full 5-year update beginning early 2021. And like the earlier planning process, community stakeholders, planning commission, and you all would provide the input that would help staff any updates to this plan. And the reason I always use the Eisenhower quote is that you know, the other kind of adjunct to that I think Churchill actually picked up on this, was that when writing a plan is not unlike building a house or planning a battle plan or painting a picture. The technique is different, the materials are different, but the principle is the same. The foundations have to be laid and the data assembled, and the premises must bear the weight of the conclusions. And that, in a in a nutshell is what we're doing here and what we've always done with the strategic land use plan. So the Collegedale 2030 plan, we're at the 5-year mark, and some changes in the context that were not apparent then when we began this process. COVID could not be predicted necessarily, nor would it necessarily show up in this view. So at this point in time, we are at the juncture where we're looking at updating based on these changing conditions. And that's what Eisenhower meant by plans are worthless, but planning is essential. You never know, by definition, you never know what's going to come. So therefore it will not, every plan will not include, these things that come out of the blue, these black swan events, but the collaborative planning effort will give us a foundation to react to them appropriately. And that's where we are, and that's what we'll continue. Question.
So as you can see, our strategic plan is quite simplistic, but it's also quite comprehensive. We try to keep it simple, but we try to address the pertinent areas that needed to be addressed. And so you can begin to review that. After the first of the year, we will start the process of slowly going through each section, make sure it's up to date. This plan is always in draft form because it's constantly changing, because our community is constantly changing. So as we work toward that. So entertain any questions members of the commission may have.
Is this a possibility to put this on the website? I know it's hard to see, probably on the website, but.
It has been on the website since it was completed.
Is it under the planning?
It's under planning and economic development under the department. And then there's a tab for land use plan. And then you can drop down and look at the plan there.
So it's there.
At first, after the mayor mentioned that, I didn't want to say anything that, well, it's on the website, but I was, 100%, 99.999% sure that it was on the website, and I double checked and it is where it's supposed to be on there. So it is posted, has been on the website.
So what does this do for us for, development? We don't control that. And we don't own the land, so we can't control it.
Right.
Let's take Rite Aid as an example. We can talk to people, but it's up between the landowner and the business to make and set, I guess, some arrangements.
Right.
Have we heard anything going on or?
Right now,
Kelly, as you answer the vice mayor's question, we also cover the soil issue we're having there that's in the process of being
right. I was definitely going to address that because there's always a lot of inputs into what a buyer and a seller or a lessor and lessee. So take the Rite Aid in particular. I'm asked frequently about that corner. Why does it? We're in receivership up until about 3 years ago and was purchased by an out-of-town owner from receivership. And it had a Rite Aid lease, which was really the value at that time. Rite Aid's closed, but my understanding is that like a lot of provisions, they even impact than that one. And then plus there's also soil remediation going on that property. It's a contaminated site. So buyers and sellers typically don't always get together until particularly until the seller has demonstrated that is not going to be a liability to a purchaser. So those efforts are ongoing right now. So that's why there's always a complicated set of circumstances behind any given property. And on that one, that's the ones that I'm aware of right there.
Remediation, that's what TDOT put in for or is that separate?
It's for the property owner had to, because of the trading post, those tanks leaked over 50 years. And so that's a known problem now in the environmental record. And so it is now being remediated slowly but surely. They were hoping that it would be wrapping up still have probably 12 months on it. And that's the best hope. Yeah,
Maybe
best
more.
hope. Maybe slightly more than that.
So once that's finished,
Purchasing the property upon some of these contingencies, I guess, being lifted, that's in limbo right now for other reasons. But so I am aware that there's interest in that property over there, but with these conditions that are not placed on by the city, they're just natural conditions or inherited conditions. That property hasn't moved, and the rents are consequently also the lease rates are fairly low for that center currently.
But even with the new developer, vice mayor limits the properties has options that are very limiting.
Even though
some things can be done, but a lot of it up with east That
Not
cannot
to,
be changed.
not to say that we're also looking at other possibilities. There's other interest in that area. The problem is, how do you work with TDOT for safe ingress, egress? How do you work around those conditions and limitations that I just mentioned? And these are all obstacles that have to be crossed to develop that piece of property. And any buyer or any developer is going to encounter that. So in fact, we get a lot of calls, and there's a lot of tire kickers, and then it gets to a certain point, then everybody's, well, we'll wait. That's too many bridges to cross right now. Developers they don't have much of an appetite for a lot of unknowns in the market right now. And I get, that's definitely wise because of the way the commercial market has been.
Well, we've seen a downturn in 4+ years. I mean, when we used the vendor to try to recruit business to Collegedale, zip code was an issue. Downturn of the economy was an issue. And I'm assuming zip code is still dead at this point. I mean, we've been to Washington, we've been to the congressman, we've been to our representatives, Shalford Road, local post offices.
And we were able actually to overcome largely the zip code issue, only to be just soon thereafter experience a general. There's a glut of commercial properties nationwide, of retail uses in particular. And that market is sorting itself out. And as you've seen probably in the news, been in the business a very long time, including CBL locally, are still trying to figure out how to address this themselves. So if those most involved and those experts are still figuring this out, that means we have a little ways to go before we see what the path forward is going to look like. But that's another reason that, you have to, these planning efforts are always ongoing, because those conditions in 2015 are certainly not holding true in 2020.
How do we take into consideration the growth that Cleveland is experiencing? Their Rite Aid was just transformed into a workout facility, and then Exit 27 has seen major growth in development properties that have sat idle for years. Did they get ahead of the curve on it, or because a lot of that has broken ground in the last 2 months? So I'm just curious why we're not seeing the growth, but Cleveland Exit 27 is.
They have better property. Simply, they have better property, better opportunities that developers see, fewer hurdles to cross. If you think about Lee Highway, which would be the closest equivalent to Exit 27, half of that is in Chattanooga, a portion of that is in Collegedale, and that is all largely spoken for at this point. So Cleveland had the advantage of having greenfield development opportunities, if you will. We don't have that same opportunity. And then those properties on Apison Pike is not currently considered a desirable commercial corridor at this point in time. Not saying that it can't or won't, or if it doesn't, then that's another reason to pick up the plan and look for other ways to maximize the corridor that we have before us. So Cleveland actually enjoyed very good locational advantage, simply enough.
There's one more point to that, Commissioner White, relative to Cleveland versus us. They're farther enough away from Chattanooga
That is
they
true.
can draw a different clientele. We're too close to Chattanooga on some of these things. Their store is further away. We're right on top of it.
And
That's a store's decision, not ours.
Right, yeah. I worked with an investor group that came to look at some properties that you and I have looked at, and we had some of those hurdles, and there were some other hurdles that were there as well.
So you're familiar with those?
Yeah.
I see.
And so many times the sellers do have some very optimistic and I guess pricing ideas. And that's nothing unusual. You're in the business. You know how that can be a seller. So we do have a lot of that, and we have a lot of broken ownership instead of just one owner. So it's definitely helpful when you have consolidated ownership versus a multitude. So when the card hand is dealt, Cleveland, for a variety of reasons, they just had a better hand that they could play at that time. Does that work in the future? Who knows? Does it work for us? That's why we have to be nimble. That's why we look at these things.
And on the Lee Highway side of Collegedale, I mean, we've got landowners that really don't want to sell or develop it.
Correct.
And I won't say who they are, out of privacy from them. And I mean, that hurts us as well. But the big property that used to be I'm going to call it the airplane recycle center, if you will. I know a developer has bought that. And they're waiting for Cambridge to finish before they come across the street. But
In today's terms.
in today's terms, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned the zip code was fixed. I thought we were still trying to recruit the zip code or the post office to Collegedale on Little Debbie Parkway for a while. Has it been fixed since then? Because this is the first I'm hearing that.
Not that the post office has corrected it on our behalf, but the way that in which we approach the market and the way that we've been selling the city has changed. Instead of trying to sell this zip code or this, we're trying to sell basically, since 37363 is so large, we're trying to sell the Collegedale portion of 37363. I know it seems, I'm not trying to just, sleight of hand there, but that realization made all the difference when we were dealing with out of town, site selectors that, quite honestly, these site selectors, and it was the realization they don't at city boundaries necessarily. With all else is equal, they really do not look at city boundaries. They look at their specific site criteria, and if it is in Collegedale, so be it. That is good for us. But if the only site that they want is available in Chattanooga, they will go to Chattanooga and they won't think twice about it. So learning the mindset was definitely helpful. So that's what I mean by that. The 37363 is not so much the deciding factor when you approach.
37363, the demographics you couldn't tie back, including salary, race, and all sorts of stuff. So how are they getting around that? I mean, that's off the table and we don't need to worry about that?
That's the demographics for a large portion of Collegedale are the same demographics as the Chattanooga side of Lee. I mean, it's the identical demographics for the most part. South side of Lee Highway versus north side of Lee Highway. The difference comes in what we just discussed to some degree is that when our hand was dealt, Cambridge, for example, Cambridge is a different animal altogether. It is going to be built out. It's going to be built to that standard because the owners, the investors are seeing to it, and it's a consolidated ownership. It's the same demographics. So they're going to be recruiting, those demographics are going to look the same as they do for us. So, by that, I guess what I'm saying is that 37363 is, that's too coarse of a scale to look at and to market. So taking that out of the equation, that was a situation when we were looked over. They were just looking, some companies were looking that were less sophisticated, were looking at that zip code, but methodology has gotten more sophisticated, and you find that it's much more sophisticated for some of the local, for some of the regional and national chains at this point. So it's evolved pretty quickly on that front. So where they're looking at basically 3 and 5 mile radius is drawn around, a point, and those demographics are going to come back a certain way. So rather than strictly a zip code, which is a coarse way of looking at it, they're going to be looking at much more specific, broken down, instead of that aggregate information.
Mailed under Collegedale.
Yeah, but
we have not been able to crack that nut.
Yeah, but I remember Kelly presenting this to us that we were being diluted in the 68 square miles. And this is first I'm really hearing, and maybe the other commissioners heard it before. I just haven't heard this, that doesn't matter to us, because to me it was demographics, salary, average households and stuff like that. So
Our demographics are good.
well, I know they are, but
Yeah.
the issue was when we had the vendor, they couldn't tie it to us somehow because of that.
And the
So
vendor,
I understand now
Right.
we've kind of bypassed that, but
They couldn't
guess-
tie it to our city limits.
they couldn't tie it to the city limits. And that's where the whole process, the evolution of learning, that what they're looking for, and it is a learning process, and like I said, it's been evolving even since we started looking at this. Site selectors are much more cautious. They're very conservative in their numbers. So taking demographic information based on one zip code has fallen out of favor because you were getting the wrong picture. In the past, it might have worked, but it's gotten to be a much more scientific. It's an art and science at this point. And so the demographic information that comes back that's available now is so much more, the quality is so much higher, and you can break it into so many subgroups. And so that's what they're looking at now, because their numbers are very specific about where a chain will expand. So zip code information, zip code based data won't cut it anymore. And that's something that has really developed and accelerated really in the last 5-6 years.
Kelly, I'm not sure if you were going to cover this or not, but one of the things too is that some of you have asked questions from time to time about East Ridge's growth. That is almost 100% tied to them having border region tax incentives. We do not have that. There's only 3 cities in the state of Tennessee that has that: Memphis, Johnson City, and East Ridge. We're not going to have those. We cannot overcome those incentives by the state.
That allows them to do so many more, or provide so many more services, or, basically to sweeten the pot, if you will, to entice developers to come in. They have money that nobody else in Tennessee, other than their 2 other border cities, have.
Good for them.
Yeah, I mean, great if you qualify, but we unfortunately do not.
Look at Bass Pro Shops.
Well, plus they sit right there on the freeway exit too.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to be a board. You have to touch another state. Your city limits physically has to touch another state and be, have interstate access, interstate. I mean, so we have an interstate exchange, but it's not close enough. I mean, we don't touch the border, so it's.
Look at the Bass Pro Shops. They're literally on the state line in all 3 locations.
Now that it's already there, I can. A developer was working and claimed to have had a letter of intent from Bass Pro Shops to locate at exit 9. Now, that's where the FedEx is. The reason that didn't go anywhere is because East Ridge was able to provide something that Chattanooga couldn't. Sewer was an issue there. Sewer was an issue in East Ridge, but East Ridge also had the money from the border tax sharing that allowed that to take place. So I was just bringing that up as a point of reference, is that it was that close to coming to East Ridge. I mean, I'm sorry, to exit 9, but that flipped it, made all the difference in the world.
Other comments or questions for Kelly? Get that to look at, and as we go forward, getting into next year, we need to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, good job, Kelly. Wayne, any update?
Have some lights ongoing. Being close to that about focusing on cutting down flood drive and doing some geotech for bridges and retaining walls will be the focus for the next year or so. They're pushing on that facilities, get everything upgraded. We're at about 60 requests for information at this point, 6 months into the job. So it's definitely a very complicated project. Very large element any side of the time. With regard to sewer, we are having to overcome some weaknesses in the survey, and so that caused us to have to redesign and change some creek crossings and extend the line up to Timberview to service those. So that will change the total cost of the sewer and footage or just our betterment percentage. If you remember, we prepaid our betterment estimated project kickoff into the project, not will wrap it up. And either send us a check or send us a bill, and then know that the project over with. So we're working on that. It's going, it is definitely a very complicated project. They have all wrapped up here recently. We did have a kickoff for the final phase of Wellesley. So they will start clearing the road, including our erosion control over the next couple of months. They're not expecting to do 2 months to get the utilities in the site ready before everything's going perfect. So, Wellesley and Markley are two subdivisions that have come along. My understanding is we didn't have any subdivisions for about 10 years from the previous phase of Wellesley. So those are ongoing. And the McKee plant expansion, civil and landscaping has been approved. We're still waiting for them to get their state permits and Army Corps permits and reroute and some of those things. And they're working with Andrew on the actual plant. But the state permitting right now is going to keep them from waiting.
So Wayne, it sounds like we got a lot done, right?
The last few months.
What a concept.
Years of projects.
Good. Thank you for that.
Question,
Yes.
how many new potential homes in Wellesley?
Off the top of my head, I think it's 42 or 44. I don't remember the exact count of community lots. There's 46 total lots, but I don't remember exactly how many communities. So it's 42 or 44.
So I think 3 being built now.
Few more vehicles,
Good stuff.
road congestion.
Eric, any report?
Yeah, so, early last week, we started a red plant project, you guys have voted on approved, meetings ago. Everything's been going pretty smooth so far. Had a couple people call and asking about some tracking and whatnot, and that will go away. They said about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on rain, when rain will get all the tracking will go away. The discoloration on the line, that'll fade back to being like it was originally. So far, when they're doing their test rates before they put it into the road, everything's taking it really well, except for one section. The test shots they did out on the new intersection on the Levy Parkway, they didn't take very well. And the reason being is all the turning that goes on, that puts a lot of pressure in the road, causes the aggregate to tighten up, which makes the road stronger, but it doesn't allow the additive that they put down to absorb into the pavement. And so they actually recommend not treating it because basically wasn't going to take and could potentially cause some slick issues. And so we decided not to treat that portion of the intersection. It also, the project's taking a little bit longer than they anticipated. So instead of doing Little Levy Parkway from the bridge out past the pipe on Friday, they actually ended up doing it on Monday. So they'll be starting that project tonight about 11 o'clock. They'll close a portion of the road from right there at the bridge at Walmart back to where the apartments are. Do that section first, and then continue on and close the section down past the pipe. And they plan to be finished about 4 o'clock this morning, open the road back up.
Excellent.
Other than that, they said all the other roads take.
Questions? Andrew?
Just a quick heads up, probably close to the end of the year, I'll be bringing a code update before you all regarding building, mechanical, plumbing, gas, fire, and property maintenance. The state requires us to be within 7 years of the most current published code. Recently, the 21 code has come out, and we are going to follow suit because of what we've done historically adjacent to us, as we know, our Hamilton County and Chattanooga. And they too are looking at transitioning towards the 18 codes as well. So just kind of that would be way too well soon.
Good.
Are other cities moving to this code?
Yep. City Mountain's already on, and I talked to the county running Blaylock, and they're working on making the transition as well.
Tracy?
So Collegedale has found themselves on another FIT list. I found out that Barbend, BARBEND.com, which is a website hub for people who do CrossFit and weightlifting. They've had some time with COVID, and they went through every state and took all the cities, and they have a breakdown of how they define their fits. And Collegedale in the state of Tennessee came in 17. So we got that notification. So kind of nice.
You want to brief on the new date of tractor swing?
I'm sorry.
You want to brief on the new date of tractor swing, moved it from Monday to Sunday?
So tractor swing is now, instead of being on Monday, it was going to be a little difficult for some people getting off work and getting some tractors here. So big band, tractors, everything has been moved to Sunday.
The 6th, not Monday, the 7th.
And the time is still the same, 5:30 to 9. Santa's still coming, so we're working on that with David.
Details to follow. Okay. Kelly, anything else from your shop?
Actually, I do. Tracy mentioned that group that, with the COVID sort of has had them able to retreat and strategize. We're doing the same thing. And just coincidentally, since we talked about the land use plan earlier, general development goal 3.0, ensure that zoning and other land use development ordinances are up to date. That's precisely what we're doing right now. We have the luxury of time, which is a luxury. We have been very busy on other things and provide a continuous planning analysis to amend the general land use plan as necessary. That was goal as well in here. And so just thought I'd bring that to your attention that is something from the plan that we're actually putting into place right now, Kirsten and I, in cooperation with Andrew and Wayne. So.
Excellent. Okay, Chief?
I don't have anything, sir.
Michelle?
I don't have anything.
Commissioners? Vice Mayor?
Only thing I wanted to put on the agenda for our next workshop would be greenways.
Greenways, okay?
I know I beat that up before. Yeah.
Can I expound on that just a little bit?
Yes,
We're
ma'am.
looking at greenways and things, but something I'm interested in is probably like when new communities, I've talked before about this, developing new residents, if there's possibility, I know a lot of it has to be with the developer, putting in parks where they're like their subdivisions and stuff to kind of pull towards that to make it more feasible for children to access parks more frequently in their area.
Is that not something that we look at right now, Kelly?
Generally, there will be there will be a community space,
Yeah.
which can be just undeveloped. But for the most part, the newest developments have included recreation provisions. It's not something that we can require under current ordinances, but it's something that in the process of a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we can discuss with the developers long before it ever
Yeah.
becomes an application, an official application. So we certainly encourage that very strongly.
And may I ask one other thing? I said I didn't have anything, but now I do.
It's okay.
Tracy and I, we were working yesterday, which you did an excellent job, by the way. I just kind of sat around, chatted, and helped clean up. That's about it. But she was approached by a young lady that's at Udoa. She teaches at Udoa High School, but they have a volleyball. And I think what did she say? They were going to go maybe for the third state. Is that what she said? Volleyball team. And they were looking at furnishing. They have a net. We have one. They might have two. The needing land that they would be in charge of, taking the stuff out and so forth. I mean, Tracy's waiting to hear. To the land across the street be something that we might be able to use for them to put their nets up, for them to have that space to work with the volleyball.
You're talking about right here?
Yeah,
We don't own it.
and there's one that we own.
And
I'm looking
anytime
at-
we used it, we've had to get
We had to cover
liability
the
insurance.
Oh, okay.
for parking and so forth.
So the challenge is going to be over here at behind us and for them to be able to put up their nets and not be on anyone else's property. Let's look into that. What would be size of the land that they would need? to practice with.
They want a sand pit?
No, they have a net. They'll come out and put the net up. They don't want a sand pit or anything like that. What they're looking at is they'll probably put up a net, from what I understood, so they can practice because they're going to go for a third state championship or something like that. They just won something big. And there's 3 in our area that live.
There's apparently a group of people that have like a meetup, and they meet somewhere downtown already, that she has a group on the incineration department, and they have dates that they put it up in, is it Forsyth Park, whatever, and they come in, they set it all up, and they play, And, they do a round robin and they, take it all down. So is the grassy area and the time frame.
But they not be able to say, it's on the park or the tractor, so.
Yeah, when Commissioner Baker asked me, that's one of the places I was thinking of. They can probably only put two, depends on how long the game they play. How, some people.
Only a break from one foot to the other. Volleyball, I think it's 20-something feet on each side.
Yeah.
40 feet wide.
Was it 4-man team or 6?
I would say it's probably.
I would say five.
Six, I'm
I
sure,
would
if
say.
they practicing for a tournament. all the
Yeah.
time.
Maybe solely their responsibility to clean up and all that. Which is not really bad for us. That'd be good for, I think, commercial in our area and everything, and adding something more to our parks and recreation and usage. Because there's 3 locally. She doesn't live here, but she's in the college, Ottawa, but there's some in Collegedale. Or did I misunderstand her?
She's just new to the area.
Yeah.
Asking about volleyball and is willing to be the key person.
Yeah. But
How
I
many
think she
courts,
said there was 2 more.
how many courts are they hoping to put up? How many courts?
I don't know where they play downtown. This was at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yesterday, so,
She-
I
she talked
gave her my
about bringing one.
information.
And she thought she had another one, would have a net. And then we have a net, I think,
I
right?
have an outdoor day.
And so there's three nets, but that doesn't mean they'll use all 3 at one time. They were just needing to practice.
If that's something Tracy wants to follow through on, I think there's more detail needs to be,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I was asking. I was looking for land. Looking what kind of land they use.
then we could figure
Because
out.
they're
the
limited
fence.
back here.
I don't think it'd be good for us just to volunteer. I think they need to come with a proposal of some kind.
That's what they were talking about doing.
Good. Anything else? Hope you all noticed that we had an enormously successful event at the Commons just last weekend at the vendors on every corner. It was probably one of the largest events we've had yet at the Commons. It was enormously successful, drew a lot of people into our city. And if you didn't get to go, it surely was something to see. It was a very, very nice, classy event, which is the goal of what we all envisioned when we built the Commons, and it was good to see that coming to fruition.
I did stop by and, a lot of it was outdoors and
Yep.
people
They did social distancing.
people
and wear
seem to be
masks.
enjoying the food and.
Everything was great.
Mhm.
Okay, without any other comments, we're adjourned.